Aloha, I'm Carl Bonham, Executive Director at UHERO and a Professor of Economics, and I'm here with another UHERO Focus video, this time talking about our third quarter forecast report. And with the devastating fires that tore through Lahaina and Kula on Maui just 6 weeks ago, the focus will be on the impacts on the Maui economy, which is now experiencing a deep and what will be a relatively prolonged downturn. But we also want to think about the overall effects on the state economy. We know that the Maui economy is heavily tourism dependent. Not quite as much as you might have seen in some news reports. About 40% of overall economic activity on Maui is attributable to tourism. Statewide, Maui County represents about 1/3 of total visitor spending. The gold bars here, they show you the share of total statewide visitor spending attributable to Maui County, to Big Island, and to Kauai County. And spending on Maui County actually made up as much visitor spending as Big Island and Kauai combined. So very, very important to the overall tourism industry. If you look at the broader economy, the light blue bars show the share of total state payroll jobs that are due to each county. And Maui represents about 12% of total payroll jobs, also about 12% of total economic activity in the state. And so what we saw immediately after the fires was a sharp downturn in visitors. Maui lost about 3/4 of their visitors, and we estimate 12, 13, 14 million of visitor spending every single day. And that has created an immediate increase in joblessness. Right, so obviously you had the businesses and the job losses that came directly from the destroyed businesses in Lahaina, but then with the lost visitor spending, it spread throughout the rest of Maui. So before the fires, the gold bars here are showing initial unemployment claims. So before the fires, we were talking about 130, 140 claims a week. Immediately with the first week of the fires, we saw about 800. Then the next week, it was over 4,000. And if you add up all the claims since the fire, we're talking about close to 10,000 filings for unemployment benefits. So 11, 12% of the total Maui workforce. And unfortunately, even as we progress in coming weeks, and even as we see some recovery in the visitor industry, we think those new claims will continue to be elevated, and we'll probably see the peak of joblessness in the fourth quarter hitting an unemployment rate of 12 or 13%. So we do think that we're beginning to see some partial rebound. The airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, Alaska Airlines have made extremely attractive fares available, and we're starting to see some uptick in the number of passengers flying into Maui. Still, the recovery is going to be a long one, and in the fourth quarter, our forecast has visitor arrivals to Maui County roughly half what they were in 2022. So in 2022, we were talking about around 800,000 a quarter. In fourth quarter of 2023, we're talking about 400,000. And then a continued recovery. We know West Maui will reopen in coming weeks. It'll reopen in October, but that reopening and the recovery of visitor spending will take time. Notice in this forecast, the gold line, this chart, the gold line shows the forecast before the fires, and the light blue line is showing the recovery path. And so even all the way out in 2027, 2028, we don't think total visitors to Maui County will have recovered. Now, not all of the Maui economy or the state economy will be impacted in the same way. So most of the losses are very, very concentrated in the tourism industry. Statewide, we're talking about construction activity that before the fires was already expected to reach a 30-year high. And now we're talking about, the reason for that was federal spending at Pearl Harbor and infrastructure projects across the entire state. Now we're talking about adding billions of dollars on top of that. And those billions of dollars are coming from insurance payouts and from FEMA money and from SBA loans and state spending. And initially that will be for cleanup, debris removal, and then eventually for infrastructure projects that repair roads and schools and sewer and water, and then finally it will be housing. So what that does is it creates an enormous shortage of construction workers. And that shortage can actually delay recovery if we can't fill those jobs and have the work progress. And it also creates a real challenge for Maui County to be able to manage the permitting process and the rules and so on. So it creates an opportunity for people who may have lost jobs and are interested and capable of moving into contracting fields to go and be retrained at Maui College or at Honolulu Community College and to get into an apprenticeship program. And one of the things that's going to happen is that rebuilding is going to lead to total job counts rebounding faster than the tourism industry, right? Because we're going to be adding additional jobs particularly in construction. And so in this graph where the gold line shows the path for the total payroll jobs on Maui, it looks like a much more complete, faster recovery. And that's a little deceiving because clearly not all of the people who were working in restaurants and bars and galleries and who have been impacted by the tourism slowdown are going to suddenly become construction workers. The other thing that this chart shows is that we really don't expect much of a slowdown at all statewide. It's really sort of a pause in job counts, in job growth statewide, and then sort of a resumption of normal growth for the next several years. And actually some boost because of the construction rebuilding. This shows up also in the broadest measure of economic activity, real GDP growth. And so in this chart, the gold bars are showing the pre-fire growth forecast. And in 2023, the second half of 2023, total GDP growth will be slower. In all of 2024, GDP growth statewide will fall a half to 75 basis points or a half to 3/4 of a percentage points more slowly. It will grow more slowly than it would have otherwise. But then after that, we see this bounce in growth rates. And that makes it look like the recovery is sort of more complete. But remember, the GDP numbers, these aren't welfare numbers. They don't tell us that we're necessarily better off. What they're doing is they're telling us that there's a lot more activity because we're replacing all this stuff that got destroyed, whether it's roads or sewers or electric lines or houses. And so it paints a picture of a more complete recovery and doesn't take into account all the pain that people of Maui are dealing with. So the big picture is that we expect a deep downturn on Maui. It's already happening. We expect the recovery from it to be slow and prolonged, to take many, many years. Statewide, we expect a modest slowdown and then actually a little bit of a boom in activity as all of that federal money and other sources of money flow through into rebuilding on Maui. Mahalo.